Welcome to the Pop-Up Pod, your behind-the-scenes pass into the world of pop-up markets. Join us as we chat with vendors, artisans, and entrepreneurs, bringing unique goods and fresh ideas to life, one pop-up at a time. Hi, welcome to the Pop-Up Pod. Today we are with Jon Tilton, and we are over here at Foxtail Coffee at the Maitland Social, which is one of our newest venues, and we are so excited to be hosting our podcast here today. As you know, we like to do things kind of raw and in the nature of our venues. So there are going to be people working and you're going to hit the coffee machine, and that's just going to be part of us. So welcome to the Pop-Up Pod. How's it going, John?
It's going excellent. I'm super excited to do this. I was excited when you announced doing the podcast because
You were one of the first people who DM'd, oh, this is great.
well, I actually always had like the thought of, oh, I would like to hear about. We were talking before we started recording. You were saying one of the points was to get the community to know more about each vendor,
Yes.
and it was always something that I was curious about as well. So I'm glad that you guys are producing this. So I can check out other people's interviews.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a story, right? We kind of touched base on a few of our other episodes, our stories behind the scenes, and now we're diving deep into our vendors. You know, what goes on outside of who you meet behind that 6-foot table at one of our venues. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to start with my icebreaker.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm all set.
Okay. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh no.
You could pay me not to do karaoke.
Yeah,
number one, but...
I don't know much of the questions, but Melissa was trying to say she was going to give me one of the two. And I was just like, I really hope it's the other one.
Of course.
But I had answers for both.
Okay.
So for karaoke, it's funny because I'm not like a big karaoke person. The last time I was doing karaoke was in college. And one of the reasons karaoke's always been tough for me is the type of music I like is like classical music or film soundtracks, things like this.
Right.
So typically not the stuff that you karaoke to.
Yeah, be able to put that range,
Or
like Whitney Houston style, right?
Yeah, or if you do karaoke to like Duel of the Fates from Star Wars, you're like, it's a very embarrassing like thing to sing or something like that. So I don't really have a go-to thing for that, but I do like classical music, film scores, things like that.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
it kind of dodges
So
the
if you find
question.
you at Big Daddy's one night, you'll be going through that list on the platform.
Where's something like that?
Again, couldn't pay me enough to hear it. So, we're on the same boat there. Okay, John, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background? Like, who's Jon Tilton besides the author?
Besides the writing, well,
Yeah.
if you watch my day-to-day, I'm very much about the writing. Like,
Okay.
the business stuff, at least at this stage of things, is how I spend a ton of my time. But things outside of that, I really like to cook. I'm like super into healthy eating and just making my own food.
What's your favorite recipe? Do you have like a go-to that you're like, you don't have to think about it?
Yeah, so I eat a ton of tacos. I just have like tacos with, and then I kind of change it up. I'll put like eggs or avocado, and then I can sort of take what I eat all the time constantly and change it up. So there's different styles that I do.
Always on a tortilla?
Yes. So usually corn, sometimes flour. It just depends. So, but I have a lot of
That's
tacos. Like, you probably wouldn't believe how many tacos I eat per week.
So could we say there could possibly be a new book in the future of Jon Tilton's recipes on tacos?
About tacos. Well, actually, it's funny because in all of these books, there's like a lot of food description. Especially, this is actually the newest book here.
Yes, I want to get into talking about.
I just got samples in this week, so
I
this
saw
is
that
like
on
one
Instagram.
of 3 copies. But currently. But in this book in particular, there's a lot of eating scenes. And then there's a pretty memorable one in this one. And even this one has, this is the short story, this has a couple of eating stuff too. So I like describing food because that is something that I like in my, outside of the writing life as well. And then the other, I also really like making salmon. The honey sriracha salmon, that is incredible. So,
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you put salmon in your tacos?
Sometimes I have fish tacos, but I think I made it on my own just a handful of times. If I'm getting fish tacos, it's like out to eat somewhere and they do a good fish taco.
Yeah.
So
I can mess it up. Okay, so let's get into your books for a little bit before I go into some of these other
Sure.
questions. So when we first met you at the Town Center, this was your baby.
You were in the works for this.
Yep.
Land of Luxury was out, and that's what you were showcasing. You had a short story that came with the book. Tell us how you got started. Where did the inspiration for Land of Luxury come from?
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of have this 1984 meets youthful kind of a connection when I was.
Yeah.
So, long story short, my daughter bought the book, finished it in like a week. She's 10. And I would read it with her periodically, but a lot of times she would read it on her own. And sometimes I'm like, can I read it? She's like, no, it's mine. And I'm like, okay. So I only got to read snippets of it. And what I caught, I was really intrigued by it, but I wanted to read it myself.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what I picked up on a little bit. So
so
tell us.
There's definitely dystopian elements to it. So it's funny when you write for kids because kids are like very curious about different genres. I like exploring different genres. The series after this one will be very different. But everything's sort of like an adventure feel to it. So I would say the dystopian element for my series, it's kind of in the back seat, like it's there, but it's not overbearing dystopian because again, keeping the kids in mind.
Fully,
you want them engaged in enjoying the adventure and not like worrying and fretting about like what can go wrong in society.
Right.
But those stuff is kind of in the background and as like kind of world building stuff. It's definitely an element in it. And so this is the first book that I ever published, but I actually wrote a few books before this. I would write books as a kid. I've been making little books and singling them together since I was a child. But I started to take more seriously maybe 5 to 7 years ago. I wrote two and a half books before this one. And I was actually working on one that I thought I was going to release first. But so this is how I came up with the idea of the story, which I should actually explain first.
Yes.
It'll make more sense. So the first book here, it's about this girl named Jane and her friends, Rodney and Sophie. And they live on this island of trash that's guarded by robots. And they find a doll there with a tag that tells them to return it to a place they call the Land of Luxury. But to get there, they have to get across the ocean and past those robots. And that's how the story starts. And how I came up with the idea is there's a childhood toy that I had and the batteries corroded inside. So it was like really bad. Like it's just a white
everywhere.
All over.
Toxic
Like, exactly. And the thought in my mind is this worth like handling and like, 30 years from now I have like cancer in my hands.
Exactly.
The stuff that isn't actually things I should worry about that I worry about. So I ended up just throwing it away. But as the trash came, I felt guilty about it because on the outside it was just in pristine condition. So that's why I had the idea. If a kid found it in the trash, they would wonder why it got there. And then I kind of like saw the main character Jade here, and it wasn't a doll toy that I had. It was like a dinosaur, but for some reason I pictured her with the doll, and then this whole story came to my mind, and I actually thought of it as a short story first.
Okay.
And I thought it would be just like a bonus story that I would write and give it away for free, which I actually do with the short story that actually ties into it now. But as I wrote the book, the story just came really naturally, and it was a full book. So that's how this one came to be. And when I was editing it, I envisioned it as a standalone, but as I did the editing process, I thought of an idea for 2 sequel books. And so that's where this one comes in, and one more after that.
And from what I know of the ending, again, my child would not allow me to actually read the book front to back. I'm going to have to snag it out of room.
To give you a copy that's yours.
My own. 10-year-olds, they don't like to share. But I could see that there could definitely be more stories coming down.
Yeah, I think any author is always thinking about, when they're thinking about the characters and where they've been and where they're going, you always think about, well, what is happening before this? And then after the story's over, you can't help but wonder, well, what kind of challenges would they face next?
Sure. So this is your newest.
That is the newest book.
And either 1 of 3 is what I'm touching right now. So this is very special. So when will your full release be for this newest book?
The official date is March 21st.
Okay.
However, it's very likely at the Lake Nona events. I don't know when this episode gets posted, but yeah, well, so definitely by the time this episode is posted, even if it's not March 21st yet, if you see me at that event, I will have copies.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's.
Do you do like a release? Do you do like a book party? Do you do?
I probably should do more stuff like that. Yeah.
Celebrate. I mean, to write a book in and of itself, and then to have a book published.
I'm
definitely
very
celebration worthy.
I'm very like relentless on my just like work discipline. I can really use a lot more slow down and celebrate parts of my life. So I should.
Well, if you're at one of the markets on the 21st, which I think we have a market, right? Like Nona Town Center.
There is. I'm doing that one, and it's actually my birthday. So.
Okay. Well, all right. Double celebration. It's happening. What are you doing anything for it? We want to get out. And so the second book is called Welcome to the Lands of Luxury. So the first one is Please Return To, and then Welcome. So let's see where it's a continuation of Jane's story.
Yeah. Which I know, if you haven't read the series yet, it seems a little confusing because the Welcome To is actually the second book.
Right.
But they start on the island of trash, and then the Lands of Luxury is a place to them far away and foreign. So they're exploring it free.
And The Mystery of June
Yes.
is your short story that does connect with Please Return To.
Yes, it's like a bonus story.
Okay.
And so this one ties into it. It's a lot shorter. It's about 40 pages. This one you can actually get for free through my newsletter sign up, but I do sell copies as well.
Okay.
It was one of those things where it started as a newsletter.
And you had an audiobook too with it,
Yeah,
right?
there's an audiobook too. That's the only way to get an audiobook is still through the newsletter.
Okay.
But people they liked it so much, and they kept asking for the printed version of it. So I got the cover done really nice, and now it ties
As
into
much
it.
as we all like things on our phone and on our devices, I still like a paper book.
Yeah.
I do. I travel with one. There's always one in my bag. Whether or not I read it on the airplane or not, I like having a paper book.
Well, I think it's the same reason why, like, pop-up markets in general is really refreshing because we do a lot of online shopping, and you're getting away from that screen space that we all probably spend too much time on.
Right.
And so,
seeing something different and new and whether versus the same thing being rotated on the screen.
yeah. And so I think it's the same with a book, especially for parents giving it to their kids or grandparents giving it to their kids. It gets them off the device, but they can still, do something that's, calm, and you can do it in your room. It's, it's not like an outdoor activity.
Right.
Right.
Something to kind of take down for the day.
Exactly.
A moment of zen.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what else I haven't covered on my question list here. Okay, so you mentioned the characters. Now, do you see yourself in any of the characters? Are any of them based off of you or friends and family?
Yeah, so this is a common question. And I think some writers do like to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I really envision the characters as their own things. Like, they sort of come to me as their own people that I have to crack the code on. But definitely there is a piece of me in all of them in some way. So, but usually just sort of subtle things for things that, because I think one thing that's key to writing characters that people relate to is you want them to be able to identify something that either they struggle or they've gone through themselves and see that in the characters so they feel connected. And so for each of the characters in each of the books, there's like an element where I feel connected to what their character arc is for some reason.
Okay.
And that doesn't necessarily mean it's like a one-to-one match, but it's something that hints at that. And so when I feel that their story resonates with something that I've been through, it can be, and yet it's still very different. I know that there's a strong possibility that someone who has a different experience from the character and from me can also find that same through way to identify with the character. So
That's great. Do you find that you've included, I know we kind of talked about this, a little bit of a dystopian society, underlying, maybe more of the adults would pick up on that, but do you find that you use any other kind of, I'm not saying that, but are there hidden messages in the book, or?
So I don't know. It's funny. This is always a tricky question. People actually ask this one at the booth a lot.
Do they?
Yeah. Because,
Okay.
well, a lot of people want to know like what the theme is or what I'm trying to say or something like
Sure.
that. And I kind of treat it like the magician doesn't reveal the secret sort of thing. But the reason is because one thing that is really enjoyable to me as the author, almost in the same way that I was talking about the characters and how I connect to them, but someone else might connect to them through a different
Sure.
way.
Sure.
I find that it's so interesting to me when people come up to me and tell me what they saw in it or a theme that they identified that wasn't even intentional from me at the beginning. So a lot of times it's feeling out what's right for the story and not trying to focus too much on getting some sort of message across,
Right.
but letting the story breathe on its own, letting the characters' paths breathe on their own, and then sort of doing the analysis later. So after I get that first draft down, or even sometimes like even in this book now, as I'm going through it as it's finished, I'm like, oh, it's interesting because there's these things that are important to me that I see coming out of it. So it's sort of on a subconscious level. There's a lot of things baked into it.
And I guess anything could be subjective. I mean, in the moment in time that you're looking at a piece of art or reading a story, you're going to take something that different in, right?
Yeah.
So you could have something going on in your world and you're going to see a different message.
Yeah, but
that you read at a different time in your life.
Exactly. That too, and I think that's really key as well. I think that's something that I really enjoy about stories when I revisit them. Ones that, like, if I'm reading Narnia as a kid, like my mom's reading.
Oh my gosh, Jessica's behind the camera. We did a podcast a couple months ago about our teens interviewing ourselves.
Okay.
And if you could be in any foreign fantasy world,
Yeah.
what would it be? And she chose Narnia.
Yeah.
Going back
Fantastic
to
choice.
which northern, so sorry. Sidetrack.
Oh no, that's any sidetrack on Narnia is perfectly fine, in my opinion. But yeah, rereading that as an adult, you get new things. You see new things. You get new things out of it. And I hope other people, and even myself, can enjoy different parts of the book at a later time of life, or even as the world changes around us, there might be other things that come out that were unintentional to begin with, but are baked into the story. I will say, to answer your question, I feel bad dodging your karaoke question and then that question. So I can answer it a little more directly. Jane is a character with like a ton of determination. So it's a
strong-willed.
She's very strong-willed.
Yeah.
And that is, she has won a lot of challenges as well. So it's a lot of the themes in that first book are about overcoming challenges and being determined through them, but also seeing the challenges that we go through as something, like seeing the good in the challenges and like the beauty in the challenges of life. I think that's something that's always been important in my own life, and so that's definitely a theme that's prominent in the book that is intentional among the other ones that are more subconscious and intentional.
That's great. I was going to ask you something else. No, I just forgot. So now tell me, I know that you kind of aim towards younger readers.
Sure.
But what do you really see the age range being? I mean, I enjoyed it, so I mean, I'm not a reader. But what is your, I guess, target audience?
Yeah, this is always the trickiest question. This is probably the number one question at the booth. Maybe right after what's the story about, it'll be like, well, what age group is it for?
Yeah.
And it's such a trick question because if I actually look at who reads a book, half my readers are adults.
Right.
But and that's why I always likened it to a Pixar movie, where everyone can enjoy it, but like a Pixar movie, it's aimed towards a younger audience. But that doesn't mean
there's definitely a level, right? I mean, it's also going to have different things from Pixar movie than children are going to play that. I used to laugh about the fact that I would watch Seinfeld with my parents as a child. Not a child, but I was pretty young. And I can remember sitting on the couch and them laughing hysterically at an episode. And it took me another 5 years to fully understand what they were laughing about. So I think that goes into Pixar as well, and it goes into probably some of the storyline. We're going to pick up on different things and think differently about them. But yeah, I mean, like I said, my daughter's 10, and she may have been 9 when she read it.
Yeah, 8 to 12 is the primary. So it's technically, so there's YA, and right before that, technical, like, library and reading bookstore term is middle grade.
Okay.
But that people get that confused with middle school, and there's so I usually say 8 to 12 is a primary reading range. But then if you actually break down the people who have bought and enjoyed the book, it's so much more widespread than that.
Right. I feel like if my child was younger than 8, I would have sat there and read it with her or read it to her.
Yeah.
Because I find that the storyline is wonderful for years 5 of that probably. I mean.
Yeah, I've had pretty young enjoy it because actually at the booth too, I include the audiobook on different cards so people can enjoy it that way as well. And I'll have like one time there was a family and they bought it and I gave them the audiobook and they went on a road trip and thinking the 2 older kids will enjoy the story and the 5-year-old will be in the back doing whatever they're doing. Right. But then by the end of the road trip, he like knew all the characters and loved the robots and everything like that. So it is always that tricky question because it really depends on the kid and it depends on the reader too. And just like what people are in the mood for. I have a lot of adults who they'll be reading like larger like fantasy novels or something like that, and this is a short like fast-paced fun adventure, and so it's a good like palate cleanser.
It is right.
So,
sometimes you're going from I don't know Harry Potter or a Ken Follett with 1,000 pages, and you just need a break and maybe a little less weightlifting when you're carrying something around. Now, I don't know if we kind of touched upon this earlier, but was there an author or a book that just triggered for you when you were younger? This is why I want to be an author. This is why I want to be a writer.
Yeah. So it's fun. This one's always funny too because in terms of like inspiration from other creatives. There were like the big thing when I was a kid, like Harry Potter was just coming out, and that was something I was always having trouble finding a book that I always wanted to read stories, but then I felt like I wasn't connecting with them. And Harry Potter really changed that. That was something that I really connected with. But I couldn't bring that into my writing today because I think of myself at that age, like the 8 to 12 age range. And so I really have myself in mind, and one thing, like I mentioned, it being like a shorter, fast-paced novel, this has like super short chapters, and that was something that always intimidated me as a kid. Like my friends would be reading these giant books, and Harry Potter's a big book too, so that's kind of a little bit of an exception, but something that would get me, better into reading. It's funny, what inspires me the most in terms of the storytelling is typically more like film directors. Like George Lucas, huge inspiration for me, both like on business and on creativity. Hayao Miyazaki, he did like Spirited Away and other, he's in Japan doing animated movies. Those are probably the biggest inspirations creatively for me.
Okay.
But authors, I definitely like Gary Schmidt. I really like. He does different middle grade books as well. They're more slice of life and a little more like not in fantasy, like really like what it's like to be in our actual world. Sort of thing. But yeah,
it's wonderful. I think we've gone through most of my questions. Actually, I have one more. What? Last question, I promise. So, do young readers ever come to your table and say, I write short stories for school, this and that, I want to write a book? Is there a piece of advice that kind of resonates to most of your young authors that you talk with?
Yeah, I don't know. I always give them advice. I don't know what resonates with them.
Okay.
Maybe I should follow up a little more.
Right? Find out later.
Yeah. I get this from a wide range of people. So it would be adults who want to write, or they've written something and they're not sure what to do with it. But and a lot of times it'll be parents trying to encourage. They know their kid likes to write, but they might be a little shy and encouraging them to ask about it. And I think it depends. I'll usually ask some different questions about how far they're at the process or what they like about writing, because it might be different advice for different people. I think the most universal one that I find myself giving is to to like both when you're starting out, but also when you're writing multiple books and further into it. One of the things that I think people underestimate a lot is just how much you'll have to rewrite everything all the time.
Right. It's not a one and done, right? It's
yeah.
not a one-time pass. Editorial process is quite lengthy.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that sort of just not being afraid to get it right the first time and just going out and doing it. I think is really helpful because people can get a little locked up on like they'll write some of the first chapter and get really worried that, well, if I write this word down, it's going to have to be like that. But it's super flexible. So,
we're not worrying so much about the perfection and getting it down, just doing it. Don't overthink, just get it out there, and then you can read it a million times.
100%. Yeah, and it's good to have other people read it when it's at a messier stage, especially people that know what they're doing. But yeah, no one's gonna be looking at your work on that first draft. So it's best to just get it's always better you want to get it out of your head and onto a page or onto the computer, somewhere where you can actually start to mess with it.
Right.
In the same way that you would if you were any sort of craftsman where you're making jewelry or
start sketching it,
building something. You're gonna find out what the problems are once it's actually out in the real world, because you have to the reality of things hits. So that's when you'll see the plot holes or things like that, and you can't let that slow you down. You have to get it all out and then keep refining it until everything goes.
I love that. Just do it. Right?
Just do it.
Just do it. Don't overthink it. We say that all the time. I think it, 9 times out of 10, it gets you where you need to go.
Yeah, I think it's probably true for not just writing, but other businesses as well. I think that's something that when I talk to different people about the creative process, I find other people, it's the same thing, whether they be painting or making something with their hands or whatever.
Right. I think a lot of times we hesitate and then we wait, and then we don't do it.
It's getting past the fear.
Right.
Everyone has this element of fear that they're not sure if anything's going to work. And the truth is it's absolutely not going to work in the first try.
Right.
So,
it's never going to work if you don't try.
Exactly. It's never going to work if you don't try. And it has to not, it's almost a prerequisite to have the version that's not working. It's a prerequisite to get to the version that's working.
Right.
So don't be afraid of having the version that's not working, because it's actually required.
Right.
You're actually on the right path.
Stages to get.
And I'm sure even with the running all pop-up stuff, it's
with
probably
everything.
The same thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Trying a new venue or a new setup or hiring new staff. I mean, just you got to roll with it, and we hope for the best, and we make tweaks along the way, and I'm so grateful that you were joining us here today, and that you enjoyed popping up with us. We enjoyed having you.
It's fantastic. I love doing events and connecting with people.
It's wonderful. And congrats again on the newest book.
Thank you.
And we're excited to celebrate with you in a couple of weeks on your birthday again for the launch of your newest book. Jon Tilton is here with us, and young author. Please Return to Lands of Luxury and the Ball. Sure. So,
thanks for having me.
Bye.
Hey.